So we started, apart from the overview of management and the development of management thoughts, we started with the functions of management, I think last 2 weeks or thereabout. And we started with the concept of planning. And in planning, we learned that as a manager, you need to be able to set the goals or objectives that you want your organization to achieve. You need to be able to develop the right type of strategies or tactics. You need to know when to achieve these objectives and so on and so forth. Then we got to organizing. And the main thrust of organizing is the fact that you will need the resources to be able to achieve the targets or the goals that you indicated in the planning. So in organizing, you want to search for all the necessary resources that the organization will need in order to be able to achieve your objectives that you specified in your plans. Okay, some of these resources could be financial, some could be fiscal, some, of course, will be human resources. As part of organizing also, we said you needed to create structures that will make efficient use of these resources. If you left the resources just idle, capital alone cannot get up to work. People by themselves without structures in place will not know what to do and so on and so forth. So you needed to create structures and systems in place to make good use of the resources. So that is the trust. And in doing so, also you pay attention to the concepts like span of management, delegation, decentralization, because all of that is meant to ensure that you make the maximum use or benefit, make the maximum use of the resources that you have in the organization. All right. After the structure has been created, after the resources have been gathered, you need leadership to drive all of the things that we've spoken about much earlier. So you need leadership in place after setting your objectives, after bringing together the resources, and after putting in place the systems. All of that is okay, but you need leadership to drive all of these things in order to achieve your aims and your goals. All right. So it is not to say that in planning you don't need leadership, or in organizing you don't need leadership. The functions of management kind of interact with each other. At any point you may need all of them, but I want us to understand the sequence that normally it will start with planning, where you set your objectives, you set your strategies or establish your strategies and tactics that will be used. You come to organizing, where you need the resources. You put in place structures and systems to make sure that these resources are used efficiently to achieve the objectives that you set. Then you get to the third stage, where leadership becomes critical to use the resources and the systems that you have put in place during the organizing stage in order to be able to achieve your objectives. Okay, your objectives that you have in your plans, or the targets that you have in your plans. So you can see that leadership is very, very important. You could have very, very good objectives. You could have very nice strategies. You could have all the resources. But if you don't have the right type of leadership in place to make use of this resource, you will not be able to achieve the objectives that you have in your plans. All right. So that will be our focus this morning. We'll be looking at the concept of leadership. And from this point, I'll be minimizing my video so that we can concentrate on the slides and the issues therein. So the learning objectives, we'll be looking at the definition of leadership. We'll look at the differences between a leader and a manager. We'll describe the characteristics of leadership, the functions of a leader, the theories of leadership, situational forces determining the choice of leadership style, and the new approaches to leadership. Okay, so as I indicated much earlier, the success of every industrial enterprise or organization is dependent on the quality of its leadership. All right. So every organization, you might have all of the resources in place, but if you don't have the right type of leadership to make use of these resources, you will not be able to achieve your objectives. So leadership is critical. Okay. So leadership has been defined by various people, different ways of looking at leadership. So we want to look at these definitions. The first one says leadership is the lifting of man's vision to higher heights, the raising of man's performance to a higher standard, the building of man's personality beyond its normal limitations. And that is Peter Drucker, 1970. All right. So it is I like the definition because it connotes two things. One, for you, the person seeking to become a leader or the leader himself or herself. And secondly, to the followers of the leader. So if you're aspiring to be a leader and if you want to be able to influence and lead other people, first and foremost, based on Peter Drucker's definition, you must be a person with a vision. All right. You must be a person with performance and you must be a person with an admirable personality. So if what it means is that if you, the person seeking to lead others, doesn't have vision, then it will be very, very difficult to lift the vision of other people to higher heights. Okay. If you cannot perform, then it becomes very, very difficult to lift or raise the performance of other people to higher standards. If you seeking to lead others you do not have the appropriate personality, then it becomes difficult to challenge others to go beyond their limitations. Okay, so the definition is almost for self-leadership and also trying to lead other people. Okay, so if you're leading other people, you need to be able to lift their vision to higher heights. They should be able to see more because you are their leader. They should be able to perform more because they have a leader, and they should be able to go beyond the weaknesses of their own personality. All right. If they were lazy, if they don't desire to talk and work in a team, leadership should be able to help them to overcome such personalities. But as I indicated, Peter Drucker's definition makes us to know that leadership actually begins with we, those who seek to become leaders. It must begin with self-leadership. You must on your own have a vision. You must have performance. You must have the right type of personality. And if you remember when we were discussing the skills of management, and we got to, I think, 10 skills, where you must be able to demonstrate knowledge in a particular subject area or expertise. I said that is the number one way to get your way into leadership. If you cannot perform the activity, it will be very difficult to go and tell others to do the same thing. So if you want to lead in any field, make sure that you become the best in that particular field, and then it becomes easier to be able to direct others and control others as to what they should do. Okay, so let's look at the other definition by Alford and Beatty, 1951. They said that leadership is the ability to secure desirable actions from a group of followers voluntarily without the use of coercion. So if you have the ability to secure desirable actions to cause people to behave in a way that you want them to behave without the use of force, that is coercion, voluntarily, you are able to let them behave in a way that is desirable, the way that you want them to, then you have become a leader. All right. Then the question then is, how can I cause people to do what I want on their own without any form of coercion? And that we can get from Peter Drucker's definition, as I spent a lot of time explaining it. You must be a person of vision. You need to be able to demonstrate excellence in your performance, and you must have good personality. If you have admirable personality, people who want to be like you, all right, has the natural tendency of following whatever you tell them. If you can perform excellently, people want to emulate that particular type of performance, and therefore they can actually be under your leadership. If you have an excellent vision, people will let go of their personal aspirations and buy into your vision, and that will help you to achieve the second definition that we're talking about. So, and the other point we have to note in the second definition is that if you're currently using coercion or force to get people to do what you want, that is not leadership. Okay. Leadership is about influencing others. It's not about coercion. It's not about using force. Very soon we'll talk about it. If you find yourself in positional leadership or authority, you want to be careful because that can be deceptive. Because it's based on the hierarchy or ranking of the organization, you can get to just command and instruct people to do whatever that you want. But if the next day you were out of that particular position, will you still command that type of respect? That at that point, it is at that point that you can really test whether you were a leader or you were just occupying a position, and it was the position that gave you that right or opportunity to be able to instruct people around. So we should bear in mind the second definition, right? That leadership is not through coercion, it's not through force, it's not through threats, but you must find a way to secure the desirable actions of your followers. And as I indicated, Peter Drucker's definition gives us a clue as to what you should become in order to be an effective leader. Let's look at the third definition. It's close to the second. Leadership is the ability to persuade others to seek defined objectives enthusiastically. It is a human factor that binds a group together and motivates it towards goals. Okay, so leadership is persuasion. So you persuade others to want to seek some objectives, not just anyhow, but with passion and zeal, willing to work extra hard. Leadership is about motivating people to commit to achieving certain goals. Okay, so pay attention to the word enthusiastically, motivate, persuade. Leadership is about influence, your ability to influence others on their own to want to work extra in order to help you to achieve the objectives that you've set for yourself or your organization. Okay. I hope we are fine with these definitions because it will lay the grounds for the other things that we'll be talking about. Now, let's look at the differences. That's another thorny area between a leader and a manager. All right. Who is a leader? Who is a manager? So a leader, a person emerges as a leader, but a manager is always put into his position by appointment. So we have to bear that in mind, that managers are normally appointed, normally in the organizational setting. So you become the head of department, you become the head of your unit, and most of the time it is because you have been appointed to the role of a manager. Leaders emerge implies that most of the time you may not be appointed, but because of your personality, because of your performance, or because of your vision, others may willingly subject themselves under your control and under your leadership. Okay. So you find yourself in a circumstance, in a group, and all of a sudden, everybody's looking up to you. There is no election. There have not been any appointment, but just because of who you are, all right, and who you are could be coming from your personality, it could be coming from how excellent you are at something, or the kind of vision that you put across. People will just be willing to let go of their own authority or rights to come and follow you. So that is the meaning of a leader. Leaders emerge, but manager is normally through appointment. Okay. Sometimes the emerging could come as a result of the circumstances or the situation of the particular place that you find yourself. Okay, so there is this example. Assuming you were traveling and your car gets stuck at some muddy place. Okay, you were 5 in the car. Most of the time, because the driver at that point is the one with expertise, he will normally ask the rest of you to get down and push the car. Okay, and whether you are the CEO or whoever in the organization, at that point in time, the driver becomes the leader, because given the situation, he's the person who has, and here I'm assuming that all the others don't know how to drive, or if they can drive, they cannot drive that big company car that has gotten stuck at some point at that place. Okay, so leaders could emerge also because of the situation or the circumstances that you may find yourself. But most of the time, for managers, it is normally through appointment. And it takes place most of the time within organizational settings, as we might all know. All right. So that helps in explaining next point. A leader always has some personal power. That is the ability to influence that enable him to lead. But a manager always has some positional power. Okay, so the ability of a leader to influence others is not as a result of the position that he holds, but it's personal power. And I said the first definition helps in explaining this. Okay, the person has some expertise in a particular area. He's the driver at that point in time. So he will tell us to get down and push. That power at that point in time is not because he's the CEO or he holds any serious position in the organization, but the power at that point in time to instruct the other passengers to push is coming because of his personal power. Okay, but the manager, normally you drive your power from the position that you hold in an organization. So you are currently the head of department for your particular department, right? Or you are the CEO of your organization, whatever it is, and you come to work, wherever you are, people surround you, they want to greet you, they want to pick your bags, and all of those things. Be very, very mindful of where your source of power is coming from. Is it because you have some personality traits or some personal power that is attracting people to you? Or it's just because you are currently the CEO or the head of department? Okay, if those attractions and the fake in quotes kind of allegiance and loyalty is just because of the position that you hold, then you have not yet become a leader. Okay, you are still a manager, because managers drive their power from the positions they hold in an organization. Okay. Point 3 says a leader focuses on people and generally seeks those very objectives which are the objectives of his followers. So in leadership, most of the time, the leader is trying to achieve something that the followers equally think is reasonable or something that they also want. Okay, so there's some commonality of interest in terms of what the leader and his followers are trying to achieve. A manager, however, focuses on systems and structures and seeks those objectives which his subordinates do not regard as their own. Okay, so if you find yourself in an organization, the target might be to mold 100 blocks per day or to increase profit by 30% in a particular year. These are not objectives of the followers. These are normally objectives of the organization. And managers that work in the systems and structures must ensure that they work together with the followers in order to achieve the objectives. Okay, so if you're a manager and you want to also be like a leader, you have to find a way to make your followers or the subordinates feel that the objectives of the organization is equally their objectives. For example, if you can connect, say, increase in salaries and bonuses to an increase in, say, the profit at the end of the year, then you can find a way to connect the employees to the organizational objectives. Okay. If you just leave it that the organization says we should increase our profit by 25%, it is too distant from them. They feel it's the organization that wants to make money. But if you can find a way to make them feel that this profit is what we use in paying your sick leave, your maternity leave, and so on and so forth, then you can try and align their personal interest with that of the organization. Okay, so that is what leaders do. They don't seek to pursue their own objectives, but they try and align or sync the objectives that they have with that of their followers. Okay. Fourth one, a leader generally looks at the horizon and not just the bottom line. He innovates, challenges the status quo, and believes in doing the right things. However, a manager is generally bureaucratic, accepts the status quo, and believes in doing things right according to the rules to cope with complexity. All right. So leaders they always think about how to change things, how to do things new in an organization or wherever they might find themselves. But if you're a manager, managers tends to be bureaucratic. What it means is that they want to keep to the systems and the structures within which they are working. So if there are some policies, some rules and regulations, they want as much as possible to stick to those rules. That is the status quo. Okay, but the leader comes in place and they want to question everything. They want to be innovative. They want to find ways to bring about change at any place that they find themselves. All right. Then the other thing we have to know about leadership is that leaders seek to, or they believe in doing the right things. What does it mean? They make sure that no matter the cost, the organization actually pursues that which is right. It could be an objective that the organization wants to achieve. And if it is the right objective, they insist or they direct the focus of the organization towards the attainment of that particular objective. But if you come to managers, they believe in doing things right. Okay, doing things right connotes the idea of efficiency. Like, we don't waste resources, don't do that, you can't do that, and so on and so forth. But before you can get to be efficient, it is very, very important that you are first and foremost effective. Okay, you must first know the things that you are supposed to do. That is doing the right things before you can get to doing things right. Okay, if you can blend the two, then that is excellent. You must be able to know the right things that you are supposed to be doing and also doing them right so that you don't waste the resources and time of the organization. So these four things helps us to know the difference between a leader and a manager. Okay, so a person, I'm going over again. For a leader, a person emerges as a leader. All right, so be very careful also, especially in organizational setting where some things are through voting and all that. If you get a sense that your people don't like you, don't try and give bribe and find your way into leadership position. Because if you find yourself there, you are likely to suffer and go through a lot of depression. Because if they don't like you, what it means is that they will not subject themselves under your influence. And that can be torturing. All right. So leadership emerge. All of the people must come together and say that, yes, at this point in time, this is the person we want to lead. We want him or her to lead us. A manager is always put into his position by appointment. All right. So within organizational setting, that normally occurs a lot. It is as a result of appointment. Leader drives their authority from personal power. Okay, so we must all get to that place. A manager always has it as a result of positional power. That is very easy. And I said earlier, once you get out of the position, all the reverence that people have for you, it's just vanishing into the thin air. I don't know whether you've observed it before, when after handing over ceremony, everybody just moves straight to the new person that has been given the position, and the old guy is left to walk alone. All right. Why? Because probably when he was in that position, he only rode on the positional power. He failed to build his personal power. Okay, if you have personal power, if you even leave the position, you still command a lot of reverence and respect from people. Okay, and here you can talk about, say, somebody like Rollins, or you can talk about even now Kufuor. Okay, these are people that they still hold a lot of reverence even though they are not in power. And this time around, it's not because of their position, because they are no longer the president, but because of probably their charisma, because of their personality and things like that. So that is what we should be driving at. A leader focuses on people, but a manager focuses on systems and structures. A leader is innovative. A manager is bureaucratic, holding on to the status quo. A leader believes in doing the right things. A manager believes in doing things right. And I say doing things right is about efficiency, and doing the right things is about effectiveness. Okay. Characteristics of leadership. Point 1 says leadership implies the existence of followers. So that's the key thing. All right. And don't forget our earlier explanation. Don't force to have followers. They will frustrate you. Followers must come to you naturally. That is where we spoke about the fact that leaders emerge. They must agree that at this point, this person should be leading us. So leadership implies the existence of followers. If you don't have followers, people that will be subject to your control, to your influence, then you are not yet a leader. All right. This should be different from the concept of self-leadership, where on your own, you want to direct, you want to control yourself, and so on and so forth, right? If you have it, then it prepares you to leadership properly as we know it. But once it is leadership, there must be the existence of followers. So if you are currently a leader and nobody is following you, you want more cautious and ask yourself whether indeed you are a leader, because leaders always have followers. 2, leadership involves a community of interest between the leader and his followers. All right, we've explained this point. So normally there is a mutual interest or objectives that both leaders and their followers are pursuing. And I said, if you are even a manager, you can translate into becoming a leader if you pay attention to these things. Okay, so if it is an organizational objective that naturally the employees might not be able to associate with, it is very, very important to make them understand how the attainment of that objective will also benefit them. In that case, you create a community of interest where you and them will have a common interest. Okay, so that is that. Point 3, leadership involves an unequal distribution of authority among leaders and group members. So this is also very important. If you find yourself in leadership position, also know that you have more higher authority than your followers. Okay. So we have people that have found themselves into leadership position, but they don't know the type of authority that they carry. All right. The also worst form of leadership is to show weakness. When you should exercise authority, you are not able to exercise that particular authority. With time, if you ask anybody to do anything, you will not get them to do it. So get to know that leadership involves unequal distribution of authority. You will have subordinates under you, and let them know, not forcefully as we've indicated, not as a way of showing off, but you must be able subtly to be able to let them know that you have some form of higher authority than them. Okay. In the same context, you must also know that somebody is probably higher than you. Most of the time in organizational settings like that, you always have somebody on top. Even if you are the CEO must be reporting to the board of directors of the company. All right. So you need to know about the unequal distribution of authority whenever it gets to leadership. And this is important because some people get into leadership and they can't direct anybody, they can't discipline anybody, they can't whatever. All right. When that happens, you are not showing leadership. You need to know that it is unequal distribution of authority, and that is the case because they want you to use the authority that you have to influence or direct the others to do things that will benefit the organization. All right. Point 4, leadership implies that leaders can influence their followers or subordinates in addition to being able to give their followers or subordinates legitimate directions. All right. So the last bit of it is for a manager, giving directions, instructing people. Normally it comes because you find yourself in positional power. Once you are the head of the department, whether they like it or not, whatever you ask them to do, they will do it. Okay, that is giving of directions, giving of instructions. But beyond that, you should be able to influence. So pay attention to the difference. Influencing them is where, even in your absence, they will be willing to do that which they think you like or what they think that you will have wished them to do. Okay, so you should be moving beyond just giving instructions and coercing and forcing and threatening to the point where you can persuade or influence your followers or subordinates to do that which you want. Once you move beyond giving of instructions or threats to the point where you can influence or persuade people, then you've moved into the arena of leadership. All right. You've moved away from being merely a manager to the point where you've become a leader. All right. Any questions so far? Are we fine with the explanations this far? Any questions? Okay, then we can move on. So functions of a leader. What are the functions of a leader? They are very, very similar to, I must say, to those of the manager. All right, because as you might have seen earlier, the differences are quite thin. If you're a manager, based on how you utilize the position, you can easily translate to become a leader. All right. If you're a leader at all times, you will also be required to perform some of the functions of a manager. So the functions are quite related. So point 1 says setting and achieving of organizational goals. Okay, so that is it. When I was trying to explain what we've done, a recap of what we've done, I said that at the planning stage, organizations will normally set objectives or goals. Okay, before we get to organizing, then we are now discussing leadership. That doesn't imply that during the planning stage, leaders are not involved. Okay, that was the point I was trying to make. They actually will set the goals and the direction that the organization should be pursuing. Okay, so they are actually involved in that particular point. But the distinction is basically for us to understand the distinct functions of a manager. Okay, but leadership is involved at all levels of the functions of manager or management. So they set and achieve organizational goals. Under that, they have to be the goal setters, set goals. They are the planners. All the planning thing is under their watch. They have to determine the objectives. They have to determine the strategies or tactics that the organization must pursue in order to achieve its goals. And then they are the executive. Here is coming from the word execution. They also must make sure that every plan that has been designed or put in place are actually implemented. Okay, so leaders also must be executives. They have to ensure that plans are executed in the organization. All right. Point 2 is very similar. The planning of the operations of the organization is the function, another major functions of a leader. Okay, one of the functions of a leader. So here, they must behave as experts. They must be the knowledgeable people that will give the instructions and the directions as to where the organization should be going. once again, pay attention to technical skills. Until you become very good in your field, don't seek to lead people in that particular field, because they'll be looking up to you at any stage to provide them direction, to provide them with vision, and so on and so forth. If you cannot perform or don't know how to go about that activity, then it becomes very difficult to provide those directions as you'll be required of as a leader. Okay. Under planning operations of the organization, they also act as external group representative. Okay, so they will represent, if you remember explanation of figurehead, of a figurehead role of a manager. That is basically what it is here. If there is any deliberation in the organization must be present, normally the leader is almost like the representative of the organization. And when we're explaining this, I use the example under management or overview of management. I use the example of the vice chancellor, that if another institution is inviting, say, University of Cape Coast, the presence of the vice chancellor is like the entire university being present. All right. So that is the whole idea of the external group representation. They represent the organization or the unit that they are the leader for. Then we have the surrogate for individual responsibility. What this means is that normally individuals will give up of their rights to leaders. If you take, say, how we go about national elections, once elections are over, not even elections are over, in democracy, the citizenry just hand over their rights to a political party or a government of the day to make a decision on their behalf. It is the same thing when it comes to leadership. People, instead of fighting for their own right, instead of agitating for their own right, they give those rights to maybe one person to act as a leader in order to act in their best interest. So a good example could be, say, union leaders, where all the union members or employees cannot come to the negotiation table. And so they have given that right by voting some executives or some person to go and represent them. So if you find yourself in leadership position, it's a big position, such that you shouldn't be thinking about your personal interest, because several other people have let go their own interests, their own rights, and they have given you that power to fight on their behalf. Okay, so you are a surrogate for individual responsibility. Instead of individuals taking up that responsibility or that assignment, all of that has been placed on your head to act on their behalf. Okay. Next point says controller of internal relationships within the organization. All right. I think this is self-explanatory. So a leader plays that particular role. All of the relationships within the organization, you need to make sure things are working out well. Then the administrator of rewards and punishments. Okay. So this is the point I was trying to talk about when I was explaining characteristics of leadership. Point 3. Leadership involves an equal distribution of authority among leaders and group members. So if you're a leader, you need to know that part of your function is to be able to issue rewards and punishments. Okay, if you cannot do any of this, it will be very, very difficult with time to be able to function as a leader. Rewards is given when others have done well. Punishment should be given when people are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. So if you are scared to punish, then probably you are not yet qualified for leadership position. So you need to know that the unequal distribution of authority is meant to help you to be able to reward those that are obeying your commands and instructions or under your influence, and to punish those that were contrary to whatever you want them to do. Okay, so yes, if you still are bothered about the opinion of people and you want to be liked or admired by everybody, then probably you are not yet prepared for leadership position yet. Because by all means, people will misbehave. And if you're a good leader, that means that you must be prepared to punish those that will misbehave in your organization. Okay, so that is that. leadership involves rewards and punishment. Then you'll also be acting as arbitrator and mediator, just like internal relationships. You want to maintain harmony and peace in the organization. So all of this fall under the major function of planning the operations of the organization. That is a major role that a leader must play, or function that a leader is expected to play. Okay, then we have the symbolic figure for the group. Okay, symbolic figure for the group. So this is another major role or function of a leader. So you have to act as an exemplar, a model for others to emulate. So that is where your personality comes in. That is where your expertise or knowledge or performance comes in. All right. They are looking up to you as a leader. If you are the leader and you are lazy, you don't expect your followers to be hardworking. They are monitoring. If you come to work late, and when you come, you pretend as if you are a serious person giving instructions here and there, it is just a matter of time. They will detect that you've been trying to play games with them, and they will start playing the same games with you. Okay, so you must be a model for others to emulate. Whatever you want them to do, make sure that you be the first person to do that. I think I've listened to UT, man, Kofi Amwabe, is that right? I think that's his name, right? And he was talking, yes, so he was talking about his punctuality, the time that he comes to work. Okay, I think he said 7 a.m. I can't remember exactly. But the whole point was that he is normally the first person to get to work. Okay, so in spite of all the traffic and everything in Accra, if he, the CEO, can manage to get to the workplace on time or before time, then as a follower or an employee, you will have no excuse for coming to work late. Okay, so that is leadership. As the CEO, he could have slept and got into work at 12 or at 1 p.m. or 10 a.m., whatever time that he likes. But because he wants to demonstrate this leadership attribute, normally he gets to work first before even the cleaners comes to the workplace. Okay. Then you also play the role of symbol of the group. So it's similar to the earlier explanation that I've said, the figurehead role. So if you represent the group. Not all of them can be there, but once you are there, it's almost like the entire organization or group is there. Then ideologists, they look up to you for ideas. So you must play the role of presenter of ideas. Once again, it comes from expertise. It comes from developing your knowledge and competencies in that particular field. All right. So you will be expected to play the role of an ideologist. And that means that most of the ideas for growth, for innovation, for development, improvement, they expect that such suggestions will be coming from the leader. Okay. As much as you want to be participative in seeking for the views and opinions of your subordinates, it shouldn't be the normal thing about you. Otherwise, your followers will think that you are not a leader. Okay. Once they have to always be giving you the ideas as to how to do things, what it means is that you are failing as a leader. Leaders are supposed to be those doing the thinking and suggesting things to subordinates. If you bring the idea, there may be some further ideas to clarify that original idea that you've brought, but it still remains your idea in the first place. Okay, but if you always come to the meeting and you throw everything to them, what do we do? What do we do? No, you are becoming a follower, not a leader. A leader should be able to know what next steps the organization or group should be taking. Then you will suggest these ideas. If there are further suggestions, further opinions, those opinions can be proffered or offered. Then you deliberate on that. But don't always be there not having any opinions or ideas of your own. That will take you away from the leadership position. Okay. Then the father head or father figure role. Okay. Fulfilling the emotional role or needs for members. That is that important. Maybe it should have been mother figure role, right? Leaders are supposed to play the figurehead, or no, father figure, role. Okay, people go through all manner of things at the workplace, at home, and all that. So if they come to work and you as the leader will compound their woes through shouting, screaming at them, that is not right. You must be somebody that if they have challenges at home, maybe marital or whatever, they may be able to confide in you during whatever break period to seek some emotional support or counsel from you, and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean you will not have your personal challenges, but once you become a leader, you must be able to deal with your own issues yourself and present somewhat a perfect personality so that you can win their trust and get them to come and share their troubles with you. But when they do that, don't go to general meetings and go and broadcast that. That is not what leaders are supposed to do. You must assist them in dealing with their issues. And that is one of the easiest ways to get to influence them. Once you help them in dealing with their emotional problems, whatever instructions or directives that you give, it becomes very easy for them to follow those directives because they see you as somebody who is caring and loving, and they will be willing to stay under your instructions. Okay, so leaders are supposed to play father figure role. And I said, I wish it was mother figure because mothers tends to be more caring and more loving than fathers. Anyway, that's just by the way. Okay. Then the scapegoats function under the symbolic figure for the group. Okay, so when there is success, most of the time as a leader, you must be celebrating it with your team members or with your group. But whenever there is a failure, the failure is projected at you, the leader. Okay, and you must have that heart to be able to accept that because that is one of the functions of a leader. When there is success, be smart enough to share with your people. In fact, if you don't even share it, they will take it. Everybody will be talking about what they did, their contribution towards that particular success that the organization has achieved. But if things goes bad, everybody will be looking at the leader and pointing their hands at the leader that you were not a good leader. So leaders also function as scapegoats. They take the blames and all of that. And sometimes it's somewhat justified, okay? So if you look at football teams or clubs, whenever the club is not doing well, no player is dismissed. They don't fire the players. I don't know if you are into football, but most of the time it's the coach that is fired. And why? Because it's the coach that will normally determine the type of players he wants to buy for the club. The coach, you go to the field with the players and you teach them the tactics or the strategy for the game plan for that particular match. On the day of the match, you are on the field to scream and direct and whatever. So once they fail, what it means is that probably you were not good enough first in choosing the right type of players or buying the right type of players, or your tactics was bad, or on the day of play, your operational plans failed you. So in all of this, you can see that the players don't come in. And so whenever teams are not performing well, the person that is normally fired is the coach. The owners of the club will be thinking about firing the coach and not the players. Okay, so we must bear in mind that that is another burden of leadership. You must be able to accept the role of a scapegoat whenever things goes bad. Okay. Let's look at the traditional approaches to leadership. But before we get to that point, any questions so far? Are we fine? If we are okay too, I want to hear your voice. Are you okay?
Hello, sir. No.
No.
Yes. The
So
first point and then the third point. Please, I want you to elaborate on it again.
the exemplar.
Yes. And the ideologist.
Yes, so the exemplar basically means that you have to lead by example. Okay, you must demonstrate by example the type of behavior that you want your followers to have. And I was using the example of the former UT CEO, Kofi Mwabin, who said that normally he's the first person to get to work. So it's an example of leadership of when it comes to, say, going to work early. All right. So that I said, if in the midst of the traffic and all that, your CEO can get to work early, then you, the follower, will not have any excuse for coming to work late. So if you want your followers to come to work late, for example, you don't do that by constantly reminding them. You do that by actually getting to work first or early. And once they see it, they are likely to emulate that particular behavior. Okay. Then the third point is that you must be, if you become a leader, you must be the person providing the ideas, suggesting the ideas for your followers. So that's the ideologist. All right. And I said, yes, participative leadership means that get your people involved and get their opinions and suggestions. But I said that doesn't mean you should throw away leadership to your followers. Normally, you must be coming with your own opinions, with your own ideas. And as you present them, there may be further suggestions for their modification. But don't always come unprepared, hoping that your followers will rather give you ideas as to how to run the organization or the group. Exactly. Please, the person who asked the question, are you clear now? Hello?
Say.
Helen, yes. Are you okay now?
Yes, please, I'm okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So you may mute your mic now. There was some feedback, so we can proceed. Okay. So we have traditional approaches to leadership. So there are three important approaches to studying leadership. So we have the first one being the trait approach, we have the behavioral approach, and we have the contingency approach. Okay. So the trait approach was actually the very first way that leadership was studied. So the early notions about leadership dealt with it almost entirely in terms of personal abilities. All right. So those researchers, several research works have been done to find out who actually can be a leader. And this research is concentrated on the personal abilities or the traits or the characteristics of people. And most of these studies concentrated on the physical, the intellectual, and the social characteristics of a leader. All right. For example, even in our country, most of the time we see tall people as people that can serve as good leaders. When it comes to elections, not most of the time, your height could play a role, even though some have been able to overcome that. All right. So the physical traits, like the height of the person, how handsome or beautiful the person is, all of these things were things that were considered in determining who could be a leader. Okay. And they are normally traits that are divinely given or born with. All right. Normally, you don't decide, say, your height, you don't decide your beauty. It's based on the genes of your parents that will determine how beautiful you become or how tall you become, and so on and so forth. All right. But the early study research works and studies on leadership believe that the personal traits of a person can determine who becomes a leader and who doesn't become a leader. Okay. And as I said, even though a lot of arguments have been made against it, one way or the other, we still see it play around. Okay. In our context, most of the time, if you are reserved and you are short and probably you are not too nice, I don't think you ever get leadership position and so on and so forth. So it's something that has received a lot of criticism, but especially in general elections, how handsome and how beautiful you are. And not just, I think, students' elections as well. Okay, I see it all the time. most of the time, this traits then plays a role. All right. So I hope you've gotten the traits approach where the personal characteristics or the traits of a person is used to judge whether the person can be a good leader or not. Okay. So qualities of a leader under the traits approach. The first one is what we've said, physical qualities, that the leader must possess a high degree of physical and nervous energy. Okay, it's almost axiomatic. So you must have it before you can be deemed to be a good leader. You must have a lot of energy. Physically, you must look attractive and so on and so forth. Then some studies focused on moral qualities. So first among moral qualities is moral courage. This enables a person on the one hand to stick to his goal without faltering, and on the other hand, to own the responsibility of his actions should the action prove blameworthy later. All right. So they looked at the moral qualities of a person. That the person has moral courage. That then will determine. Moral courage is the ability to have your own mind or goal as to what you want to achieve, but also the willingness to accept when the goal or the dream that you had fails, the willingness to accept defeats or criticisms. You remember our explanation of scapegoats, all right? Those with moral courage will go with their vision, will go with their goals, but if they don't succeed, they are also very much willing to accept the blame for those failures that come in the course of pursuing their goals. So moral qualities were some of the qualities that they looked at in order to determine whether somebody could become a good leader or not. Then the third point is the sense of fair play and justice. Okay, a leader must possess this quality to be able to motivate his men into action. So are you somebody with a lot of sense of justice and fairness? All right. If you are somebody that always desire justice and you want fairness, then based on the trace approach, you are deemed to be somebody who can be a good leader. All right. But I just realized in our context, if you have this trait, fairness and justice, okay, it will be very difficult unless the position is appointive. And if even if it's appointive, the appointing authorities themselves will not appoint you because they themselves don't want people that will come and be doing justice, come and do fairness and all that, with all of this politics going on. Okay, when it's appointments, they want you to appoint a party person or somebody who play ball to their interest. But the early approach studies to leadership looked at sense of fairness and justice as some of the traits that a person must have in order to be a good leader. As I said, this approach to leadership study has attracted a lot of criticisms. Okay, so let's look at some of them. Point one, this approach, except for intelligence and emotional maturity, has failed to identify any traits as being essential for leadership. So as I said, there were several things that were used, the height of people, the beauty of people, and so on and so forth. Most of them were not consistent. What it means is that even though you could find somebody handsome and tall, being an effective leader at one point, at another point, if you were to get somebody with the same physical features, the person led very badly. Okay, so there was no consistency in terms of the traits and how somebody could perform as a leader, except for the consistency were only in intelligence and emotional maturity. It was found out that in most cases, all good leaders had intelligence and they also had emotional maturity. But issues like the height of somebody, the handsomeness, and so on and so forth, did not prove or were not essential for leadership. Okay. Point two, there is the problem of defining traits. So that is another criticism of this approach to leadership. The definition, for example, even intelligence that is accepted as one trait that all leaders need to have. the definition of intelligence is something that is very, very difficult. Okay, if you were to Google right now to find out types of intelligence, you realize, I think some Harvard University professor, I've forgotten, it's Gerald or something, came out with 8 types of intelligence. Okay, and it runs from the physical ability, like acrobatics or something. If you can play football, anything that takes physical abilities to do, like Ronaldo or Messi, what they do is some level of intelligence. If you love football, sometimes when you see them play, you can almost scream that these guys are intelligent guys. Okay, but that is a type of intelligence. Then we have the normal type of intelligence that we know. All right, the ability to probably study, memorize stuff, and go and reproduce, and so on. So even with intelligence, there are various types of intelligence. So if you tell, or as a researcher, if you finally come to tell us that it will take intelligence for somebody to be a good leader, the question is, which of the types of intelligence are you talking about? Okay, among the 8, or depending upon the scholar, the 20 types of intelligence or whatever, which one really should somebody possess in order to become a good leader? All right, if you move it away and you enter into the arena of somebody should be handsome or beautiful, then it becomes far, far more difficult. Okay, because as the adage goes, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder. So who will determine whether somebody is handsome? What will make the person handsome? Who will determine if somebody is beautiful? What are the traits that make somebody beautiful, and so on and so forth? Okay, so the second criticism of this approach is defining the trait itself. It's not very, very easy defining the traits. All right, so the third point is close to that. There is the problem of measuring the traits. So it's very, very difficult. How do you measure even intelligence if it is not the normal IQ thing? If it comes to people that are intelligent in, say, sporting activities, how do you measure that? Okay, if you come to those that have intelligence in creative works or arts, how do you measure that? So the measurement of the traits itself was problematic. Okay, then the other problem with this approach or these studies was the methodology that was used. So the methodology is also difficult. That is, pre-leadership traits were not considered. So basically what was used is that, for example, if you become a successful leader, then the researchers will come to you and come and look at your traits and then conclude that people with these traits can be good leaders. Okay. The argument is that what were their traits before they became the leader? Okay. Is it not possible that they have developed these traits, such as emotional maturity, intelligence, because of the leadership positions that they held? I don't know whether you are getting the argument. So there should have been pre-leadership traits and post-leadership traits, so that the pre-leadership rather will help us to know who can be a good leader. But if you go for the traits of a person who is already an excellent leader, how do we get to tell whether he had those traits before getting into leadership position, or he is now acquiring these traits because or after the leadership position? Okay, and leadership builds you a lot because you interact with people. You have to learn tolerance, you have to learn patience, and all manner of things. You have to learn how to deal with disappointment, with backbiting, all manner of things. All right. So the methodology that were used in the study of leadership was quite problematic because they didn't study pre-leadership traits. They concentrated on post-leadership traits. Point 5, the approach overlooks the situational nature of leadership qualities, and that is very, very key. Okay, so normally it is very, very difficult when it comes to leadership stages because the situation, the context is very, very important in determining how somebody can become successful as a leader and how somebody could fail as a leader. Okay. Somebody could have same traits as another person, but will fail in one circumstance or situation, and the other will succeed in the other situation. All right. So they fail to look at the situational nature. For example, if you are somebody who is calm, gentle, intelligent, and so on and so forth, you may do well if you're dealing with professionals or highly intelligent people, because they can identify with you and will be willing to take your instructions and so on and so forth. So you don't really have to be bossy. You don't have to scream because you are dealing with professionals. Okay. If you take that same attitude and send it to what do you call it? Construction sites. Okay, to go and direct people that mold blocks or those that are into manual work with the same traits, you are likely to fail because that environment will not support that type of trait. Okay, so it is wrong to just concentrate on the traits of a person in order to determine whether the person can be a good leader or not, because the situation will determine whether somebody can be a good leader or not. Okay, in actual sense, some people, especially the unskilled, actually expect a leader that will be shouting and screaming at them. Okay, because their orientation, that's the type of person that they want to see before they work hard. So if you go and you are gentle, you are quiet, in fact, after work, they'll start insulting you. And later they'll come to work and they'll be sleeping because they know that as for this our leader, he can't talk. Okay, so situations are very, very important in determining who can become a good leader, and not just the traits of the leader. Okay, point 6. The approach implies that training cannot make a man a leader if he's devoid of certain inborn qualities. So as I indicated, the traits approach also placed a lot of focus on inborn abilities of people or qualities of people. Okay, so what it means is that if you are not born with it, that's it. They are supposed to be natural abilities. Okay, so if you are not born with it, what it means is that you cannot be trained to become that, and therefore you cannot be a leader. Okay, but we know that people can be trained and coached to become very good leaders. So that was another criticism of the traits approach. Okay. Before we get to behavioral, are there any questions on the traits approach? Any clarification? Anybody who needs clarification, or we are fine? Okay, since you are quiet, that means that you are okay. Let's move on to behavioral. Behavioral approach. So the inability to find the answer to their question, what determines leadership, in the traits approach led researchers to look at the behaviors that specific leaders exhibited. Okay, so they moved away from traits, more of the inborn qualities of people, and they are now looking at the behavior. What behaviors will make somebody a good leader? Okay, so prominent in the behavioral approach is the assumption that leaders are not born, but can be trained. So the traits approach made argument that leaders are born. All right, the behavioral approach wants to counter that and says leaders are not born, but can be trained. You can be trained to become a leader. So under the behavioral approach, researchers have studied leadership behavior from 3 points of view. Okay, so they want to look at the leader. How do you motivate your followers? So motivation, how you go about motivating your followers can determine whether you can be a good leader or not. So the behavior that you put out in motivating your followers is one way based on the behavioral approach. how do you exercise authority? So that is the second dimension. How you go about exercising authority according to this approach will determine how successful you become as a leader. And the last one is, how do you go about supervision? Okay, what is your interest when it comes to supervision? How do you supervise? That also will determine whether you can become a good leader or not. Okay, so these three things are the major issues under behavioral approach: how you motivate your subordinates, how you exercise your authority over your subordinates, and how you supervise the activities of your subordinates determines who a good leader is from the bad leader. Okay. So motivation. From the point of motivation, leadership behavior can be either positive or negative. So basically, these are the two things. Some people, leaders, will motivate people negatively, and others will motivate people positively. So you want to ask yourself, where do you find yourself? And then teaching motivation, I will be doing motivation. Most of the time, I talk about that. When we mention motivation, all that we think about is the positive side, right? We always think about the rewards. We always think about the praise. We talk about promotion. But that is not the only way to motivate. Okay. Motivation is basically how to influence people to, it's almost like leadership, to commit to doing something well. Okay. And you can do that through rewards, or you can do that through punishment. All right. So your behavior, the leader's emphasis is on reward. Within the positive behavior, the leader's emphasis is on the rewards to motivate the subordinates. In negative behavior, the leader's emphasis is on penalties and punishment. So that will determine the type of leader and how successful you become. Are you the leader that focuses on positive behavior? In other words, are you the leader that uses rewards to motivate your followers to do what you want them to do? Or you are the leader that relies on penalties and punishment to motivate people? These two will help in determining whether you become a successful leader or not. Okay? But you have to know that in practice, you must know when to use both. And I think I've explained this much earlier. There are times that you have to be able to issue penalties and punishments. So you shouldn't just be saying mine is reward. No. Within some context, and when you are dealing with some category of people, followers, if you don't know how to motivate through penalties and punishment, you are not likely to succeed. Okay. But basically, how you use these things, rewards or the positive and the negative, will determine how you'll become successful as a leader. And that is the first dimension of the behavioral approach. Then the next one is how you exercise authority. So from the point of view of authority, leadership can be one, autocratic leadership. And I think these ones are things that we've heard over and over again. All right. So you can lead by being autocratic. And this type of leadership, the leader alone determines policies and makes plans. He tells others what to do and how to do it. He demands strict obedience and relies on power. Okay. So from the description, it may look like the autocratic leadership is a bad type of leadership. And of course, in most contexts, you are likely to fail if you want to operate as an autocratic leader. All right. But you also have to bear in mind that there are some situations where the best way to lead is by being autocratic. So once again, we come to the situational things, variables in leadership. So you cannot throw away autocratic leadership and say that it's a bad type of leadership. Yes, in most organizational settings, if you're dealing with averagely intelligent people and normal organizational settings, you cannot succeed by being autocratic most of the time. But there are also some contexts, even within the same organization, that you need to be autocratic in order to get the results that you want. So we need to be very, very careful in the categorizations and the boxing of the various types of leadership, because In the same organization, there may be a context where you have to be autocratic, and there may be a context that you may have to be democratic. So how you use this various, how you exercise your authority in all of these situations can determine how successful or otherwise you become as a leader. Okay. The second one is also familiar. Democratic leadership. In this type of leadership, also known as participative or person-oriented leadership, the entire group is involved in and accept responsibility for goal setting and achievement. So democratic, you involve your people in the making of decisions and so on and so forth. So this may work largely in most organizational settings, but you have to also know that in some settings or situations, democratic leadership will not work, just as it is with autocratic. So you want to be careful. Don't just label yourself as the democratic leader. No. There are instances, I think I've emphasized this already, that you have to have an opinion and push people to accept it because you believe in it so strongly. All right. So democratic leadership is good in most contexts, but not in all contexts. There may be instances where you have to be autocratic. Then we have the free reign or laissez-faire style of leadership. Okay. So in this type of leadership, also called laissez-faire leadership, the leader exercises no control. He only provides information, materials, and facilities to his followers to enable them to accomplish group objectives. Under what circumstance do you think the free reign type of leadership will be a good type of leadership to exercise? Yes, I need your input. First and foremost, do you think it's a good leadership style? Laissez-faire style of leadership? If yes or no, I want the circumstance under which you think it should be good. I see some hand, but I can't see that. Okay, Regina.
Hello, Prof.
Yes.
I think the organizational structure is something we call something, is it professional bureaucracy, something like that.
Yeah.
So I think with that one, you can use the laissez-faire.
That's right.
You just provide the materials that they need to work with and the equipment. Then I think with a small guidance like the way you said, then I think it will work in that environment.
That's right. So under which environment won't it work?
Let me say maybe in a military, I don't know, military. I think laissez-faire will not work over there.
Do you have to get to the military? In your organization, if you were to tell them everybody should do whatever they want without guidance and whatever, do you think that the university will move forward?
No, I don't think so.
Yes. So we don't have to get to the military. Okay.
Okay, Prof.
Yes. But I think that the explanation is excellent. So if you're dealing with professionals, I think I spoke about it the other time. Highly qualified experts. This is the type of leadership you should be exercising. Okay. Yes. And so back to our football clubs also. If you normally go to our types of clubs that we have in Ghana, you have the coaches and whatever going to the field to teach these guys how to kick football, how to do whatever. That doesn't happen in big clubs where you have the big boys there. It is not time for you to be teaching them how to kick footballs and so on and so forth. Basically, it's about warming up. It's about teaching them the tactics or the strategy that you want them to play for the day and so on and so forth. Because you are dealing with very, very excellent players and so on and so forth. So the type of or the nature of the coaching and the training and the guidance when you're dealing with big clubs is not the same as when you're dealing with the smaller clubs. Okay, at that foundational level, you need to be teaching them the basics. But when they get to the higher stage, no coach will have time for you. Otherwise, they won't spend so much money buying you. In organizational setting, as we've explained also, If we're dealing with professional guys, okay, medical doctors, lawyers of repute, and all manner of professionals, you want to be careful not to be try to micromanage them. I think I've used this word over and over again, but rather just provide them guidance, provide them some information materials that they need with just some few guidance, and they are good to go, okay, to achieve the results that you want. But that cannot be said of every typical organization, all right? So you cannot once again classify yourself that my leadership style is laissez-faire. No. If you do that, you can mess up things in your organization. There are people and contexts within which that style of leadership will work well. Okay, so under the behavioral approach, how you exercise authority, either as autocratic leader, as democratic, or laissez-faire leader, will determine whether you become a successful leader or not. I hope we are clear with that. Okay. Right. So let's look at the merits of autocratic leadership. So as I said earlier, don't always see autocratic leadership to be a bad type of leadership. It all depends on context and situation. So it has its own merits. The first one is this type of leadership can increase efficiency, save time, and get quick results, especially in a crisis or an emergency. Okay, so if there is a crisis or an emergency, that's not the time to be calling for meeting for people to suggest opinions because you want them to participate. No, if you do that, you will not be a good leader within that context. So if you want results, quick results, you want efficiency, especially when there is crisis and emergency, the type of leadership to exercise at that point should be autocratic leadership. Okay, point 2. The paternalistic form of this style of leadership works well with employees who have a low tolerance for ambiguity, feel insecure with freedom, and even minor decision-making requirements, and thrive under clear, detailed, and achievable directives. So paternalistic style basically is like father-son relationship or father-daughter relationship, right? Like parent and their children. That is the whole idea. And they said this type of leadership is like that because your leader will simply come and be instructing you as if the leader gave birth to you. All right. But in spite of that, it works well because normally you may be dealing with employees with low tolerance for ambiguity. What it means is that they cannot deal with any situation where they have to think, like anything that will cause them to reason beyond the normal. They can't handle it. So you may be dealing with employees with low tolerance for ambiguity. They don't want ambiguous stuff. They want things that are clear, okay? Feel insecure with freedom, even minor decision-making requirements. So there are also employees that don't feel okay with freedom. If you give them freedom, they don't know what to do with it, all right? They come to work, they want somebody to be on them to work before they work. If you just allow them and assume that they will work, by the time you come back, they may be somewhere sleeping. They don't know what to do with freedom. And even minor decision-making requirements and thrive. I like they thrive under clear, detailed, and achievable directives. So these employees require a leader that will give them clear, detailed, and achievable directives. So you must constantly be on them to direct them as to what they should do to achieve the targets or the results that you want them to achieve. Okay, so if you're dealing with this type of employees, you cannot be pursuing democratic, worst of all, thinking about the free reign type of leadership. Okay, so when you're dealing with this type of employees, you must pursue autocratic leadership style in order to get the results that you want. Okay, point 3, where the chain of command and division of work are clear and fully understood by all. Okay, so who is supposed to do what are clear and fully understood by all, then also autocratic leadership becomes very obvious. because we have the chain of command, who is supposed to be reporting to who is supposed to be under who, and so on and so forth. So you come to work, you know your head of department or head of unit, and so that head of unit has that right to be able to give you instructions to get things done. All right. So the chain of command, division of work, everything is set in place. And so it is good then to exercise autocratic leadership. When you're dealing with the experts, the laissez-faire or free reign, or the professional bureaucracy, as we learned under organizing, normally the leader doesn't even want to be identified as the leader. Okay, he's considered as the first among equals. They are all medical doctors, and you are just the coordinator for that group. Normally, they will like the word coordinator or something of that sort, team leader, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's not like there are hierarchies to show somebody's under this person's under that. No, they are mostly together as professionals, and one of them is chosen to be their leader. But when you have clear-cut hierarchies or chain of command, then it's autocratic leadership becomes appropriate to implement. Okay. The merits or disadvantages of autocratic leadership: the apparent efficiency of one-way communication often becomes a false efficiency. The apparent efficiency of one-way communication often becomes false efficiency. So you can be efficient, achieving your results very quickly and whatever by just giving directives, right? And you may be happy with the results initially, but that is not really realistic, because once you are not available to give those guidance and those commands, what happens? Everybody goes to sleep, and that will cause productivity to dip. Okay. So when you're operating under autocratic leadership, you may be getting the results, but in reality, it is not coming from the free will, so to speak, of your employees. They are not working out of their own desire. It's because of the pressure you're putting on them. What it means is that you have to sustain that pressure, that coaching, those directives. The day you fall sick and you are not at work, or the day you come to work and you are not feeling fine, that would be a holiday for these employees, because they have not been made to get involved on their own. They were only forced to get into the efficiency mode. And as a result of your absence, they are more likely to go to rest instead of working hard for the organization. Okay, so the apparent efficiency may turn out to be false efficiency, because they were being efficient under duress or coercion. Point 2, the autocratic leader is alone in his decision-making. What this point is trying to say is that, you say, if the decision, you don't get the suggestions and that is required for you to be able to modify your decisions. So you may end up making very wrong decisions, because you didn't seek for the opinion or the support of other people. Okay, so that is the idea of he's alone in his decision, because it doesn't involve others to help refine and improve upon the decisions that are made by an autocratic leader. Point 3, people express their resentment to authoritarian rule in the form of massive resistance, low morale, and low productivity. So you see, point 1 is very related to point 3. Okay, so initially they may be efficient, they may be working hard, but the day they will decide to resent, this is what is going to happen. Point 3, there will be massive resistance, there will be low morale, and that can also lead to low productivity. Okay. Let's look at the merits of democratic leadership. When people participate in and help formulate a decision, they support it instead of fighting or ignoring it, and work hard to make it work. I hope this is very clear. So if you get people involved, then they will support that, and that will help you, and they will work hard to help you to achieve that. 2, the leader consistently receives the benefits of best information, ideas, suggestions, and talent, and operating experience of his people. So it's different from autocratic, where he said the autocratic leader is alone in his decision making. Okay, with democratic, the leader receives the benefit of best information, ideas, suggestions, and talent, and operating excellence of his people, because he allows them to be able to make input and to be able to make suggestions. Third, this style of leadership permits and encourages people to develop, grow, and rise in the organization. All right, by merely allowing people to make suggestions, it helps them to be creative and helps them to be able to develop. Okay, so that is the idea of this particular advantage. The merits: it is not all rosy for democratic leadership. There are disadvantages. The first one is the participative style can take enormous amounts of time and may degenerate into a complete loss of leaders' control. All right, so that is it. Sometimes you give room for your subordinates and they now want to hijack it. As I indicated, if you don't have your own ideas, you will become a follower, because you come to the meeting and you don't have your own opinions or suggestions, but you rely on them. Those who want to lead, or naturally, people just have the natural tendency to be leaders. They are very good at leading and not as followers. So if you come unprepared, they will lead for you, okay? And that can lead to a lot of confusion, waste of time in the organization, all right? So that is the idea. Point 2, subordinates may show greater absenteeism and tardiness. Okay, so if you're dealing with lazy employees or subordinates, and people that want to be directed, people that want to be coached from or supervised at any point in time, and you want to practice democracy, what will happen is that there will be a lot of absenteeism, or they come to work and they won't feel like working, or they won't work hard, because so in their mind, they have become like the leader, all right? And so they will not be willing to put in their best. So if you're dealing with some category of subordinates, you want to be careful about democratic leadership. Some leaders may use this style as a way of avoiding responsibility. That's another important point. Okay, some leadership comes with responsibility. As I indicated, you are the ideologist. You have to be coming with the ideas. Some don't like that. They don't want the trouble of thinking through to find solutions to problems. So they always go to meetings seeking to get opinions from their followers instead of going with suggestions. All right. As I indicated much earlier, being even democratic doesn't mean always taking on board any idea. No. What you do is to have some ideas and go out there and propose them. As you propose, there will be some counter suggestions and so on and so forth to improve upon the earlier idea that you brought forth. But if you don't accept responsibility, what happens is you go without any idea or any thought of yours and simply rely on your followers to suggest or make suggestions to you. With time, you are likely to lose control as a leader, okay? So some leaders use this leadership style to avoid responsibility. They don't want to do the thinking. Rather, they want the followers to do that for them. Okay. Then the third category, if you remember, we said your leadership success or failure will be based on motivation. It will be based on what again? How you exercise authority, and then how you go about your supervision. All right. So these are the three key things under the behavioral approach. How do you motivate? Do you motivate through rewards or punishments or threats? So that's the positive and the negative. Then when we got to how you exercise your authority, that's where we saw these three types of leadership, whether you are autocratic, you are democratic, or you use free reign type of leadership. Okay, now we come into supervision, all right? So from the point of view of supervision, leadership style can be either employee-oriented or production-oriented. An employee-oriented leader cares more for the welfare of his subordinates than for production. A production-oriented leader cares more for production than for the welfare of his subordinates. Okay, so these are the other ways of looking at how you can become either a successful leader or an unsuccessful leader. The kind of supervision, how you go about your supervision. Are you more concerned about the welfare of employees, or are you the leader who is more concerned about productivity? Okay, I hope this is quite clear. So 2 important studies under this category are the Ohio State's University Study and Management Grade. So these 2 studies helps us to see the various categorization all under these 2, whether there is concern for more concern for people or concern for employees, or there is more concern for productivity. So this is the Ohio State University study. They had what they call the low structure. They had what they call structure and consideration. Okay, structure is basically more concerned about how activities are organized in the organization, basically all boiling down to production. How well do we organize our things in order to increase production in the organization? The consideration bit is more about the welfare of employees or subordinates in the organization. Okay, so they came out with these 4 quadrants. But before we come back to this, let's look at that. Okay, so let's just discuss that. So based on this, they think that there can be 4 models or types of leadership. First, you can have a leader with low structure. What it means is that when it comes to the systems and how things are organized in the organization, they don't really care much about that, how production activities go on and all that. Such a leader doesn't care about that. The same leader doesn't also have consideration for people, the welfare of employees. Okay, so we can have a leader like that. Then we can have a leader that has high consideration. What it means is that they care a lot about the welfare and well-being of subordinates or employees, but they have low structure, all right? They don't care so much about how things are done and the systems, the arrangements at the workplace. Then we have one that could care more about the structure, but have less concern for people or employees. Then you have a leader who has both high concern for structure as well as high consideration. Okay, so based on their study, they think when it comes to supervision, these are the 4 categories or models of leadership that we can have in an organization. All right, so they came out with initiating structure, refers to the leader's behavior in structuring the job of the follower and establishing well-defined patterns of organization and communication. So that is the structure bit. Okay, yes. And then the consideration, the concern for people or employees is the leader's behavior showing mutual trust, respect, and friendship. All right, so to what extent does the leader show mutual trust and respect and friendship towards his subordinates or followers? The initiating structure is the leader's behavior in structuring the job of the follower and establishing well-defined patterns of organization and communication. And based on what we saw, we could have 4 types of leaders, okay, based on the permutations that we saw much earlier. So these 2 types of leader behaviors are independent. Some leaders follow structure, but provide little consideration. Others are considerate, but provide little structure. Many leaders, however, do not fit into either of these 2 categories. They use an even mix of structure and consideration. Okay, so that is that for supervision. Are you clear with this particular study? All right, so how well you add up or mix these things will determine how successful you become as a leader. All right, whether you have concern for structure or to what extent you have a lot of consideration will determine how successful you become as a leader. Okay. Then managerial grade has the same thing. Okay, so they looked at concern for people, all right, similar to the consideration of the Ohio State University's one, and they have what they call the concern for production, similar to the structure, initiating structure of the Ohio University study. Okay, so the same kind of explanations. All right, you can have somebody that has low concern for people. At the same time, they have low concern for production. Okay, so that type of leadership or management is known as impoverished management. Okay, that leader doesn't have any regard or concern for the welfare and being of people. At the same time, the leader doesn't really care about production. Okay, then we can have this. All right, on this lane, we have the ratings for concern for people. Okay, so the person has high concern for people, but low concern, no, high concern for people, but low for production. All right, so 9 is here, low concern for production is here. So you can have a leader like that, and that leader will be referred to as country club management. That style of leadership is referred to as country club management. Okay, then you can come to this extreme end here. All right, authority compliance management. You can see from the name, authority compliance. So when it comes to concern for people, they are low, but when it comes to concern for production, they are very high. Okay, so this type of leader is more concerned about productivity or production, but they tend to have very low concern for people, the needs and interests of people. All right. Then you have probably the middle of the road management. All right. So middle of the road, as the name suggests, tend to give equal weightings. Sorry. They have equal interest for concern for people as well as concern for production. All right. And the last one is known as team management. They have high concern for production, at the same time, high concern for people. Okay. So generally, your interest when it comes to supervision, according to the managerial grade, will also determine how successful you become as a leader. All right. So that is that for that. So from the managerial grade, we can describe 5 types of managerial styles, or in this context, leadership styles. They make use of terms like concern for production and concern for people. And the explanations I've given, that is what has been repeated here. All right. One tends to have this, and one tends to have that, and so on. So the explanations is coming from what we just did from this particular chart. Okay. Any questions? Any questions so far? Before we come to the last approach. So we had 3 approaches, isn't it? We spoke about the traits approach, the behavioral approach, and now we are coming to the contingency approach. Okay, I guess you've heard this word. And even in explaining the previous ones, I kept making reference to this particular type of approach, because I kept saying that pay attention to the situation. The situation will determine whether it should be autocratic or it should be democratic. So that is where this contingency approach is coming from, right? Okay. So the contingency approach to leadership views the leader as a product of times and the situation. So pay attention to that. So how well you become or how successful you can become as a leader is dependent on times and situations. Okay, so that is the argument of the contingency approach to leadership. The leader is a product of the times and the situations. It attempts to identify which of the situational factors are most important under a given set of circumstances, and to predict which leadership style will be most effective under those circumstances. All right. So important among contingency leadership models are Fedler's model, Hesse and Blankat's model, Robert J. House's model. So all of these guys try to provide different scenarios and the type of leadership that will be deemed to be appropriate under that scenario. Okay. So the main thrust is that there is no really one type of leadership style that you can use across board all the time and in all situations. It is really the situation that should determine the type of leadership that you should be practicing at any point in time. Okay. And I consider this to be more pragmatic or realistic than just seeing yourself as autocratic, just seeing yourself as democratic. No, you need the situations will make any of these major three classifications redundant. All right. You need to know the situation, and that will determine the type of leadership style or approach or management approach you should be using. So according to Fedler's model, this model postulates that the effectiveness of leadership style depends on situational variables. Situational variables, according to Fedler, depends on three factors. So he argues that the leader-member relations, whether it is good or bad, will determine the type of leadership style that you should use. Okay, the task structure. Is it a job that is well structured, so that they don't, the follower or subordinates doesn't need your directives to know what to do? Okay, is it well structured? Then the position of power. Are you in a place where you have a lot of power and authority over your subordinates? That will determine the type of leadership style that you should be using. So first, your leader-member relations. If you have a good relationship with your followers, that should determine or influence your leadership style. If your relationship with them is bad, extremely bad, that should determine the leadership style. If it is moderate, that should determine the leadership style. Okay. The task structure. If the work is unstructured, right, that should determine or influence your leadership style. If you are dealing with a task that is very structured, that should also determine the leadership style. Position of power. If you have high power over your subordinates, that will also determine the leadership style. Okay. But if your subordinates are your co-equals, so to speak, right, they are of the same rank like you don't have too much power over them, that should also tell you the type of leadership style you should be pursuing. Okay. Yes. So let's look at some further explanations of this model. So Fedler has found that the task-oriented or the authoritarian leader is most effective in extreme situations. That is both when the situation is very favorable and very unfavorable. Okay, so the scholar argues that if you have these three indicators, either being very favorable to you as the leader or very unfavorable to you as the leader, you can pursue and succeed with autocratic style of leadership. All right, so let's go by the explanations again. What he's saying is that if you have a very good relationship with your subordinates, the work is highly structured, and you have enormous power over your subordinates, you can lead by being autocratic. All right, and you will be successful being autocratic. Does it make sense? Does it make sense to you? Please, I want input. Are you guys there? I'm the only one.
Yes, Prof.
Yes.
We are here.
Uh-huh.
But Prof, I want to ask
Yes.
I don't know the relationship with these two, because when you have a leader-member relationship is good, how can you use the autocratic again?
That's why I'm asking you whether it makes sense to you.
Yeah,
So to you, it
because
doesn't make sense.
yes.
It doesn't make sense, right? Okay.
No,
Any
that
other
makes sense to me.
Any other view?
Yes.
Any other view?
No, so mine is a question.
Yeah, answer my question before you ask your question. Okay, you can ask. You can go. Yes, I'm listening.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hello,
Please, I'm
Prof.
listening.
Yes, I wanted to find out too. With the contingency, if I want to understand it in a layman's language, does that mean an emergency, something very urgent?
No. Contingency basically means situational.
Okay.
Contingency is situational. So understand it this way. So there is no one best way. It's the situation that will determine what to do. All right. So that's the meaning of contingency. The conditions, the contingencies, the situations will determine the type of leadership. Okay. Any other opinion? Regina says he doesn't agree. Any other opinion? Guys, are you watching?
Hello, Prof.
Or you are here?
Prof.
Yes.
This Regina, it's not as if I don't agree, but I'm saying, how come you have a good relationship with your members, then you are using autocratic leadership? I don't understand.
It's the same as not agreeing with that point.
Unless maybe the relationship is not good, then you want to have your way.
Good. I like that aspect. So basically what he's trying to say is that, you see, if you have very good relationship with people, you can always get them to do what you want. Do you get it?
Yeah.
If you have people that don't like you that much, then that is where you are likely to face opposition. Okay? You say this, then they come with this, and so on and so forth. But if you have very good relationship with your subordinates, you don't really feel that they will oppose anything that you do. All right? So you can always say something, be certain that you can get it done. So that's where the logic is coming from. Do you get it? Do you guys get it? Do you get the explanation? Oh.
Yes.
Oh, you are not here. Somehow saying.
Okay, so let me use this example. Can I say maybe Rollins? Because he has the charisma. Whatever he says, it's like the people themselves are willing to do it.
Beautiful. But you know the thing that you are worrying. So like that, like the Rollins case, right? Yes. So if he says something, whether it makes sense or not, because of probably the admiration that they have for him, they'll get it done. They'll say, Chairman, consider it done. All right. Yes. So that is where that point is coming from. Okay. So let me just use that. So, and the reverse, he says, if you also have a very bad relationship with your people, then that is also the appropriate time to use autocratic leadership. I hope that one makes sense. Does it?
Yes, ma.
Or you don't want to argue? Does it also make sense? So he says that the extreme end, if you have very good relationship with the people, you can use autocratic and be successful. If you have very bad relationship, that's the point when you come, you call for meeting, nobody will come, right? Or they will come and they will fight you. So the best approach under that scenario is to go after or use the autocratic style of leadership. All right. So it makes sense in the context. And I love the explanation of the power as well. Okay. If you have so much power over your subordinates, you don't really need their opinion that much. You can just be instructing them to get things done. All right. And you are also at the extreme end where you think your subordinates are even more powerful than you. If you call for a meeting, they will hijack you, they'll make you look stupid. So you must actually also be autocratic in order to be able to lead them. Okay. So his point is that if you find yourself at the extreme ends of these situations, the best approach is to be autocratic instead of trying to be democratic. Okay. Maybe now you might be debating it, but go and reflect upon it. You see that it makes some sense. All right. Okay. So that is the first point. Fiedler has found that the task-oriented or the authoritarian leader is most effective in extreme situations. That is both when the situation is very favorable and very unfavorable. Okay. But when the situations are moderately favorable or unfavorable, the best leadership style is employee or relationship oriented. Okay. So if you find the state or situation where you don't have enormous power over your people, or you don't have whatever, you are not also the least in terms of power, moderate, then you should be moving towards more of the employee or relationship oriented. Okay. So, and finally, he makes the case that since moderately favorable or unfavorable situations are most common for supervisors and managers, the implication is that in general, the employee-oriented leadership will be most effective in managing human resource in the large majority of organizational situations. Okay, so the first case of extreme that, they are rare cases. And because they are rare cases, he thinks that the employee-oriented or relationship-oriented style of leadership will be most appropriate in most organizational situations. Okay. But as we've just learned, if you find yourself in the extreme case, then you should be thinking about the authoritarian style of leadership. And that will help you to be more effective than trying to go after the employee-oriented leadership. Is it clear? Are we clear with this before we move to the next
Yes, sir.
Hey, yes, I can only hear small, tiny voice.
Sir, we are clear.
You are clear?
Yes.
Okay. Then let's move on. All right. So we'll move to the next callers and what they say. So Hesse and Blanchard believe that the relationship between a manager and subordinates moves through 4 phases. As subordinates develop and mature, and that managers need to vary their leadership style with each phase. So they argue that employees, they mature or they grow in phases, all right? And you need to vary your leadership style based on the state or the stage of the employee that you leading or supervising, all right? So what it means is that you don't have to use the same style of leadership for all the subordinates or the employees in your organization. You need to know the state that the person has found himself, like we have even for normal life. The person becomes a child, they become, is it adolescents or teenagers? Adolescents, then they become old, and so on and so forth. How you talk to children and treat children is not the same as you deal with an adolescent, and it's not the same as you deal with the elderly or the aged. Okay, so that is where their research was focusing on. Depending upon the stage of your subordinates, that should determine the style of leadership style. So let's look at that. In the initial phase, when subordinates first enter the organization, they need to be instructed in their jobs, organization's rules and procedures. At this stage, a high tax orientation by the manager is most appropriate because low tax orientation will cause anxiety and confusion among the subordinates. Okay, so when the person comes to work initially, they don't know anything. They are left from right. Okay, so that's the time to use tax orientation, to be guiding them, to be directing them, to be giving them rules and regulations and other for them to find their fit. Okay, so at that stage, you have to pursue a lot of the tax-oriented type of leadership, where you have to be on the person, to coach the person, to guide the person from point, if you want, micromanage the person from one place to the other, okay, at the initial phase when they come into an organization. Stage 2, as subordinates mature and as the manager's trust in them increases, he can become high in a relationship, though there is still the need for him to be high in a task. So as the person matures, then you want to build some rapport with the person. So the initial phase is more like there is no serious rapport in terms of relationship, friendliness and all that. No, it's more about work, directions, instructions. Okay, but as you build trust in the person, then you start the relationship bit of it. But that doesn't mean you should let go of the task, because the person has not yet matured yet. Okay, but he has moved from the initial phase and he has gotten the second stage. In the third phase, the subordinates are expected to grow so much in maturity that the manager needs no longer be high in tax, though he can continue to be supportive and considerate to strengthen the subordinates' resolve for greater responsibility. I hope that is clear. So it is the stage where the person has gotten to some maturity, and so you don't now have to be coaching the person how to do his work. Okay, so this is where most leaders and managers get it wrong. The person has gotten to a stage where they feel they know how to work, and you still come to work and you want to teach them how to work. All right, they'll fight you. You'll get in trouble with them. They are not like the first and the second stage people. Okay, all they need at the third phase is to be supportive. So that also brings us to the laissez-faire or the free reign. And that brings us also to the professional bureaucracy that we learned earlier. All right. Then finally, as subordinates become highly mature, motivated, and self-directing, the manager can reduce his concern for both for the task and the relationship. All right. So as they get to the final stage, in fact, this is the stage, if it is a partnership type of business, that is the stage you have to be thinking about making them partners. All right. So they are highly mature, they are motivated, they are self-directing. So you don't really have to be nice to them to get them to work or do what they are supposed to do. And you don't have to direct them as to what to do. All right. You just have to leave them to do their work as they wish and please. Okay. So yes, I hope we've learned something from this also, that once again, you don't treat all employees equally or your followers equally. You have to know the phase in which they are in the organization. The way to treat those at the initial phase is not the way to treat those that have matured. All right. If you don't get it right and you want to use the same approach for all the employees, you'll get into trouble. All right. So you may be directing and shouting and screaming at others. You see that they are quiet and going by your direction. You talk to the somebody who's mature the same way and see the kind of reaction you get from the person. Okay, because they don't at that stage, they don't expect that you'll be able to direct them that way. So we need to know the stage in which our employees are or subordinates are, and that will determine the way to lead or guide them. Okay. Any question? Yes, Regina.
Prof, I think with these stages, I think one mistake a newly appointed maybe managers has been doing is that when they are newly appointed, they don't realize the stage where the people that they are appointed over are. So at times they try to impose certain things on them, maybe rather learning from them and maybe before knowing them and assign what they're supposed to do to them.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is why you are doing this program, right? If you find yourself at the managerial position, don't just start by issuing instructions. Okay. You may end up realizing that the person you were screaming at or directing, you should have been learning from the person. Okay. So it's important to understand your environment once again, to understand the people that you are working with, their knowledge level, their abilities, and that will tell you how to deal with each of them. Okay, if you just assume you are the manager so you can behave anyhow towards any of them, you'll get into trouble. And I agree with you. Yeah, sometimes because of the name manager, you assume or think you know more than all of them, but they are not all at the same stage. You have to take your time and understand the stage of the employees or the various stages of your employees. Okay, let's look at the last one. Any other concern, by the way, or we are fine? Okay, so according to Robert House, there can be 4 types of leadership behavior. All right, so we have a directive leader. Let subordinates know what is expected of them. So he just instructs subordinates as to what is expected of them, gives them specific guidance on what should be done and how it should be done, schedules the work to be done, maintains definite standards of performance, and asks people to follow definite rules and regulations. So it's almost like another name for autocratic leader, okay? A directive leader. That is how Robert House chooses to describe such a leader. Then he has what he classified as a supportive leader. A supportive leader is friendly and approachable and shows concern for the status and well-being of his subordinates. Okay, so he has another leader category that he calls a supportive leader. That's another behavior that he identified. Then he has a third one, achievement-oriented leader. Such a leader sets challenging goals, has confidence in his subordinates, and emphasizes excellence. So that is another behavioral trait that he found in some leaders. Then the last is a participative leader, takes decisions after consultation with his subordinates. So this behavior is also akin to the democratic style of leadership style that we learned much earlier. All right. So he basically spoke about the various types of leaders that are available in an organization. So let's move to the situational factors determining choice of leadership style. So far, we've seen some hints based on the scholars, especially the first 2 scholars that we've learned from. All right. So situational factors determining choice of leadership style. The first one is factors in the manager himself. Okay, so the nature of the manager himself, his attitude, values, knowledge and skills, experience and maturity, etc., influence his feelings, assumptions, perceptions, and behavior. So the leadership style that people have most of the time is based on who they are in the first place. Okay, so their values, for example, if they value sense of justice or fairness or equity, that will translate into how they lead or manage other people. All right. If they value, say, respect for people, the dignity of people, that will translate into how they actually relate to people and how they talk to their subordinates and so on and so forth. So the first point is that how people lead is normally based on who they are. Okay. And much earlier, we spoke about things like your vision, your personality, your performance. All of those things will influence how well or otherwise you lead. So first, factors within the manager can determine the choice of the manager's leadership style. Most of the times, even from the upbringing of the person, all right? If you lived with your parents and all that they did was to scream at you, they don't talk, they scream, they shout. All right, you will grow and think that is normal. That is the way to talk to people. All right, so you'll be managing or leading people, and all that you do, instead of having some nice, quiet conversation with people, all that you know is how to scream. And sometimes it has its roots from how you were brought up as a child. So the factors in the manager himself or herself can determine the choice of his leadership style. Point 2, factors in subordinates. There may be certain factors in subordinates, i.e. their experience, ability, and training that may work as substitutes for leadership and make leader behavior unnecessary and redundant. We just spoke about that earlier. All right. So the type of leader or the factors in the leader, subordinates, can influence. If you're dealing with a subordinate that has the experience, that have the knowledge, you don't really have to struggle because they have the ability to work independently without a leader. The reverse is the case. If you have subordinates that don't know what to do, they want to be guided, they want to be coached, they want to be directed, that should also determine the type of leader you should be. Okay. Yes. So that is the factors in the subordinates can influence choice of leadership style. So really, if you go to, after this course, if you go to any work setting and you see somebody shouting, screaming, and not being nice to their subordinates, don't just conclude that the person is a bad manager. It is important to get to know the type of subordinates he is dealing with. All right. They might be subordinates that if he doesn't do that thing or work that way, he will not be able to get the results that he wants. As a matter of fact, sometimes you'll be surprised that if you even talk to the subordinates or his followers, they will consider that leadership to be normal or even appropriate because they know who they are. Okay, so it's always important for us to understand the situation and know the type of leadership style to use. 3, factors in the general situation within which you lead in. So important factors in the general situation which have a bearing on a manager's choice of a leadership style are the leadership style of the manager's supervisors, job demands, and the pressure of time. So pay attention to the first one. That is the explanation I gave relating to even parents. Okay, so the leadership style under whom the manager is coming from or came from can influence his leadership style as well. Okay, there is the higher tendency to emulate the person that mentored you or coached you and so on and so forth. It will take a lot of personal determination, even if it is bad. Okay, it will take personal determination and consciousness to shift away from bad supervision and not replicate that when you're now supervising or leading other people. Okay, there is the natural thing is that if you were under autocratic leadership style, you may become an autocrat or you will become an autocratic leader. If you were a leader that practiced democratic leadership style, you are likely to become a democratic leader and so on and so forth. Okay, so the leader under whom you served before becoming a leader has a way of influencing your leadership style. Okay, but my philosophy always is that if you didn't like it, then don't let others experience that. All right. If you were under some leader that kept shouting at you, that kept demeaning you, that won't allow you to err or suggest anything, and you didn't like that and you were complaining to others, when you get the opportunity to lead, you should be able to lead better and know better. Don't repeat the mistakes of the leader that you served under. Okay, but human beings, I don't know what happens. Most of the time we forget our past easily and we'll repeat the same things that we complained about other people. Okay, so that's the first one. Then the job demands as well. All right, some jobs are so taxing, they are so challenging that you will not have time to be democratic. You will not have time to be calling for meetings. It's similar to the pressure of time, really. Okay, so you're dealing with a tax that is very tough. You need to be there to guide people, to shout at people, to do whatever to get the work done. So if the demands are high, job demands are high, that will also demand or influence the style of leadership style. And as I said, it's similar to pressure of time. If you have time, then you can be democratic. You can be calling for meetings to seek for opinions. But if time is not on your side and you have to meet some deadline, then you need to put a lot of pressure on your subordinates or employees to get the work done. Okay, so the style or the choice of leadership style is based on the factors in the general situation. All right. Then the last one is the factors in the organizational system. How the organization itself is structured, its systems can influence the choice of your leadership style, or should influence the choice of your leadership style. So important among these factors are division of work. All right. Is the organization operating a decentralized system where we have several divisions of work located at different places? Okay. So if they are located at different places, what it means is that you cannot be calling people together to share ideas, to interact with them, to get their opinions. What you have to do under that circumstance is to be autocratic or to be directive in terms of giving instructions to the various divisions as to what they should do. Okay, so if you're operating in an organization where the works are in different geographical locations, the nature of the work that you are not close in terms of physical proximity, then you should not be thinking about democratic style of leadership. Okay, and it's not because you don't want to, but you are being forced to choose that because of the organizational system. Okay, it's different if you are in the same vicinity or there is close physical proximity. Then you can always be calling for meetings for people to come out with their views and suggestions and so on and so forth to get things done. All right, so that can influence the choice. Then the organization structure itself as well. Is it the case that the organization has a tall or a flat structure? And I think we hinted on this. Once it's tall, most of the time it goes with bureaucracy and it goes with some level of autocratic style of leadership, because we have ranks and levels that must be respected. And so you cannot be practicing democracy when you have a tall structure. So whenever we have several layers in an organization, the best style of leadership to be using is autocratic or the directive style of leadership. Okay, the reverse is the case of a flattened structure, right? A flattened structure means that there are no several layers and you are almost co-equals. If that is the case, then you should be looking for more participative style of leadership. All right. And even the production technology itself. Are you dealing with cases of unit or job order? Job orders are where, or unit order is where you have a client coming to give his or her specifications as to how the product that you want to produce should look like, the features that product should have. All right. So it's based, you are producing the product based on the specifications. So you need a lot of opinion and suggestions from your subordinates as to how to address that particular or to produce that particular product or render that service to the clients. All right. Because most of the time they will be coming with novel ideas. How do you call it? I think it's called tailor-made, right? Yes. So tailor-made product. So you need some suggestions, some contributions from your followers in order to be able to meet the unit or job order. Okay. If you're also dealing with process manufacture, then that also goes with participative style of leadership. And process manufacture, when I was thinking about it, what came to mind was what's the name of Ben Carson? There is this advanced scholar in US. I think he has contested for presidential election before, but he's known. He's a well-respected surgeon. Okay. And I think in his book, Gifted Hands, he gave a description of when they want to do surgery of very complex cases, like when you are co-joint twins, two babies, and they have their heads together. All right. And normally he is into those kinds of operations. In his book, he describes and how this one comes to play is his description of the different group of people that have to attend to such an operation. Okay, whether it will be successful or not, you have the surgeons themselves, you have anesthetists. I don't know all of those kind of this, but there are various specialists. And he described the stages that all of them must go in for that operation in order for that operation to be completed. Okay, so if you're dealing with such a process where you have to move from one, you need a group of or a set of people to deal with stage 1, then you move to stage 2, you need a cooperation of the people that even started with stage 1. Then you cannot be autocratic in that type of situation. Okay, so if you even take the normal chain of production where it must move from table A to go to table B, most of the time you might find some problem and you want to come back to table A to have a discussion as to why that particular thing happened. So if you're dealing with a process manufacturer, most of the time you must be going for participative or democratic leadership style. Okay, but if it's the case of mass production, so you can compare mass production with the unit or job order type of production. With mass production, you are not producing to meet any specific specifications, right? Nobody comes with any unique something. You have your own specifications and you're producing that in a mass, large volumes, in which case you can choose to be autocratic because you don't have to deliberate about anything. You just want to produce the same thing in larger quantities. And so that allows for autocratic style of leadership. But the thrust of point 4 is that how your organization is structured, the systems, how it is organized will also determine the type of leadership style you should be using. Okay, so as I said earlier on, avoid a situation where you always want to be known or seen as a particular type of leader, because based on the contingency theory, it is actually based on these situations that would determine the type of leadership, that style that you should be pursuing. Okay, so let's look at new approaches to leadership. Are they really new? They are not too new, but the others are far more older. And I just want to say that under this situation, there are several other leadership styles that are coming up. My area of research is into leadership, and so there are several other. We have relational leadership, Pygmalion leadership style. We have what again? What did we have? Servant leadership, several other types of leadership that are coming up. Okay, most of the time, scholars and researchers want to come up with their own stuff and be recognized for that. So several other scholars are trying to come up with different leadership style. Okay, but the new approaches that are common are the charismatic approach. So it's a throwback to the old traits approach. It defines a charismatic leader in terms of certain personality traits and skills which enable him to exercise profound and extraordinary effects on his followers so that they voluntarily identify with the organization, its standards of conduct, and willingly seek to fulfill its purpose. So the throwback says that the charismatic approach is almost like the trait approach. If you remember, we said the trait approach, they normally rely on the characteristics or the traits of a person to determine whether the person can be a good leader. Okay. With a charismatic approach, it's quite similar, where based on the personality traits of somebody, he's able to attract a lot of followers and people that like him. And based on that liking, they are able to get to lead them or influence them to do certain things that they wouldn't otherwise have done. All right. And in Ghana, I think Regina mentioned Rawlings. Yes. So people have argued that if he had stood with any of the other presidents, even after so many years, he will have been president up to date. All right. Not probably because of his whatever, but just based on his intelligence and his charisma. Okay. He had a lot of that going for him as a human being. He just has this personality that everybody seems to like or admire about him. Regina, I saw your hand.
Prof, please, can you help me with this thing? I'm a little bit confused. You see the traits, the behavioral, the
the traits approach,
traits, yes, the behavioral and the contingency. Please, you say they are type of what?
No, they are the approaches, like the bigger approaches for studying leadership.
Okay.
So you can
please,
study
this one, is it under any of them or is on its own?
It's on its own. So these are this is not part of the traits. These are on it. They are on their own as new styles of leader or approaches to leadership. But the point we're trying to make under charismatic approach is that the best semblance to the traits approach that we learned. The traits approach was arguing that your traits, especially your inborn traits, can determine how effective you can become as a leader. Okay. And the explanation of charismatic approach is also similar because it also relies on the traits and the skills of a person to determine whether the person can become a good leader or not. All right. But it is not under the traits approach. Only that is very, very similar to the traits approach. But it's a modern way of kind of bringing back the traits approach. Okay. Then we have the transformational approach. It defines a leader as one who leads his organization through successful transformations by shifting the values, the beliefs, and needs of his followers. All right. So it's coming from transformational approach, where you come in and you don't just let things be as they are, the status quo, but you want to find a way to bring about change. Okay. So you want to change either the values, the beliefs, and the needs of your subordinates in order to achieve something higher than you met it as an organization, as a leader. Okay, so it makes necessary policy changes in their recruitment, selection, promotion, almost all the things that he can change in order to bring major transformation in the organization that he has found himself. Okay, any questions? Any questions so far? Has the lecture been helpful? Have you learned something new?